Jeez, you already know what it is. Myself, Omega Axel, aka Unefa, back once again, putting in the ancestors' work. What's good? Wagwan. What's going down for the live and locked in fam? Peace and more powers to everybody tuned in right about now. I hope you're feeling bliss. I hope you've had a good day. Hope everything's nice and live. First thing I have to say, as per, is a big black African powered thank you to each and every single one of the patrons, new and old. Over the last few weeks in particular, we've got a new growing set of fam, so thank you very much. Your support is going to be continued because we have some exciting projects to announce over the next few weeks. I don't want to say too much right about now because this is not the video for it, but also a big thank you to everybody who's been tuning in over the last few weeks. You know, we've been getting it in. We've gone through 75 facts so far. We've broke down the reasons as to why it's important that we remember the ancestor J.A. Rogers, aka Joel Augustus, the Jamaican born historian and journalist. And it's also been covered why we need to bring his work back to the forefront of the black African community, because it's 83 years later, 83 years after he's put out the first 100 amazing facts about the Negro, and most of this information, as I've been finding out from social surveys, our brothers and sisters don't know. So if it is that we have this bountiful, abundant history of an advanced legacy, if we don't know about it, we can't build and improve upon it. So I think, as I must have said this before, but a positive reality begins with a positive mentality, and that begins with the representation, with the idols and the heroes, so to speak, that we put in front of the next generation. So, you know, I'm ultra gassed to be able to produce the new 100 amazing facts about the Negro with complete proof, the 2017 edition celebrating black excellence. And I guess the thing that I've found so far, like advertising this and letting people know that the book is coming and what it's all about, is people are saying, oh, Negro, why are you still using that term? And I'm sure if you are one of the people who have been tuning in over the past couple of weeks, it will make extreme sense as to why I haven't changed the term or the title or changed the name. Because we as black African people today need to take back the tools which we created, which are now being utilized against us. And words, of course, are one of those. We know that the ancient Kemetu people utilized, you know, the reading and writing systems, but Negro is our word. As J.A. Rogers points out in fact 91 of his original work, Negro, which derives from the word Niger, assimilated into the Latin language. It wasn't added by the Latin language, okay? So we need to take these things back because they're being utilized against us. And as we've discussed before, this word Negro was utilized ultimately as an excuse to treat black African people in the Western world and on the continent the way that they did. It was the excuse for colonization, the Jim Crow laws, lynching, all of these different things here were umbrellaed under the term Negro. So, like J.A. Rogers, I understand that this word Negro has been turned into this word. That isn't what it was. I understand that the word Negro represents an abundant history, like I mentioned. So I want to remind our brothers and sisters of this. But anyway, you know me anyway. You know I can chat for days. So what I want to do real quick is I actually just want to read to you the actual biography which I wrote about J.A. Rogers. Leading again introducing the actual book, because I've realized again that, you know, most people or many people don't actually know who he was or what he did. So I did give a quick brief breakdown in the first video, which you may have seen, and I mentioned that I was going to save this till last. So that's the book, 100 amazing facts about the Negro. It'd be crazy if you didn't know what book we're talking about at this point in the video. But anyway, Joel Augustus Rogers. Born September 6th, 1880 in Sheffield, Westmoreland, Jamaica, he was raised alongside 10 siblings, mainly by their father, Samuel John Rogers, a Methodist minister and schoolteacher. Joel and his siblings were all able to gain a basic education and were continually reminded of the importance of education. Joel never attended university or received any formal education and thus is considered to be an autodidact, which is somebody who is self-taught. After school, Joel enlisted in the British Army, serving in the Royal Garrison Artillery Division based in Port Royal, a career which lasted a few short years after failing a medical exam which would have seen him posted overseas. Now, like his siblings, Joel decided to emigrate to the United States in 1906, and he found himself briefly living in Chicago, Illinois, before settling in New York City. Joel's interest in the military remained a constant throughout his life, and he wrote a series of articles and pamphlets that highlighted the African American experience during the American Civil War of 1861 to 1865 and the African American experience based out of Germany in World War II. When Joel first arrived in Chicago, he enrolled in the Chicago Institute of Art in 1909, studying interior design, supporting himself financially as a Pullman porter during the summers, a job which he kept for around a decade, allowing him to travel throughout the country and his interests in journalism and history peaked when he was able to research more about how racism, segregation, and the Jim Crow laws affected the African American experience. It was in 1917 that his first work was officially published, although done privately and printed by M.A. Donahue Co. From Superman to Man was a success. It was a polemic novel with a plot revolving around a Pullman porter's heated debate with a racist Southern politician, where Rogers used a range of contemporary historical and personal arguments to refute the notion of black inferiority. Most people consider From Superman to Man to be his seminal work, as the ideas and notions which he presents in the book appear further developed and more thoroughly explored in his later publications. In 1921, Rogers relocated to Harlem, New York City, where he became acquainted and personal close friends with the father of the Harlem Renaissance, Hubert Harrison, who was dubbed the Black Socrates by John G. Jackson. Rogers was active amongst a network of street historians such as Carter G. Woodson, John Edwards Bruce, Arthur Schomburg, Marcus Garvey, Pauline Hopkins, who were all responsible for the dissemination of culturally and historically empowering information for the African American of the area. The Harlem Renaissance inspired an unprecedented sentiment of unification, nurturing a flourishing academic, artistic, and intellectual spirit amongst the community. Sadly, many of the street historians had their scholarship denied and overlooked despite the integrity of their information, on the grounds that few of them were institutionally trained. Segregation and the prominence of racism intensified the difficulty gaining access to libraries, universities, publishing houses. Joel, like many of the other rising street historians, resorted to self-publishing and writing articles for the black press and speaking on the circuit that they created for black empowerment and liberation, and maintained a self-funded career for over 50 years. So for that alone, for being self-funded, at this period of time where, opportunity is, has to be self-made for a black African person in at this period of time. So 1920, 30, 40. Where were we? Joel's time in Harlem saw his career in journalism elevate to the mouthpiece of the black community. He'd already established himself successfully writing for the Chicago Enterprise and the Chicago Defender, Crisis, the American Mercury, the Messenger magazine, the Negro World, and later regularly for the Pittsburgh Courier. For the Pittsburgh Courier. Joel was also served as the sub-editor for Garvey's daily Negro Times, and it was for the Pittsburgh Courier that he actually travelled to Abyssinia, or Ethiopia, to cover the coronation of Haile Selassie, which included the interview with the emperor himself in 1930, and he returned 5 years later to cover the attempted Italian invasion and occupation of Ethiopia. Joel is recognized as the only African-American journalist on the ground during World War II, and based on the accomplishments and the reach of his writing, was considered to be one of the top black journalists of his time. Joel managed to publish a total of 39 works in total, which in their totality, alongside his physical presence, played a tremendously positive role in educating, empowering, and uplifting the diaspora. He articulately and unapologetically challenged the institutional, systematic, and academic and social racism in such a meticulously prepared, concise, and understandable way that he cemented himself in the blueprint that the civil rights struggle of the 60s was built on. Joel's work still receives regular citation, which inspired a generation of self-supporting scholars like Dr. Joseph Ben Yochanan, Dr. Jen Henry Clark, Sheikh Anta Diop, Chancellor Williams, Amos Williams, John G. Jackson, Ivan Van Sertima, and many, many more, who all successfully continued the tradition of uncovering the denied African legacy and contributions to world history. Of the 39 works, of which all are listed at the back of the book, there are some which are considered to be classics, including World's Greatest Men and Women of Colour and African Descent, published in 1935, The Real Facts About Ethiopia, published in 1936, Sex and Race Volumes 1 to 3, published in 1941, 42 and 44 respectively, and Nature Knows No Colour Line, Research into the Negro Ancestry in the White Race of 1952. Before all of these titles were published, in 1934, Joel published his first edition of the very important 51-page book called 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro with Complete Proof, a shortcut to world history of the Negro. And it was later revised and re-released in 1962. 100 Amazing Facts sought to showcase and present a wide variety of obscure black facts to empower a population of people fresh out of slavery, simultaneously dealing with segregation and Jim Crow laws. Understandably, the black community of the 30s, subject to an open and aggressive experience of racism, was in need of reasons to be proud. With education for African American people at this period of time something available to the few, the narrative was dictated to African Americans societally about their origins, their history, and their collective achievements, their value to society, their potential, and their right to self-determination. It was all designed to keep the people submissive and accepting of mistreatment. Irrespective of his intellectual esteem, Rogers, being self-taught and multilingual, because he was able to speak German, French, Italian, Spanish, and of course English, as a journalist and a historian who'd achieved so much in both of his professions, was never approached to contribute to any leading historical, anthropological, research journals or projects, and he was never granted or awarded any scholarships or any type of funding to assist his research. He was never and has never been or was never approached by any mainstream publishers, and upon his death in 1966, the build up to the civil rights movement, despite his success, he actually died in debt to his book printer on March 26, 1966, and Joel's wife Helga kept the legacy alive up until her death in 2013. So you know, just from what we've just we've gone over there, like Rogers put in works. For him to be the person who was inspiring the likes of Dr. Ben, your Asa G's, yeah, yet the likes of the Ashras, okay, like, he was a powerful guy. He was rubbing shoulders with the father of Black History Month, Carter G. Woodson. So you know that he was part of this, this epoch, this group, which basically provided the spinal cord for the civil rights movement, which we benefit from today, quote unquote. So yeah, let me not talk for you too much, you see, because I'll go for all day. Please support the book, okay? Please go and support the thing, because I put a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of work into it, okay? As I've explained in other videos as well, it's not just the 100 facts which you're going to get with the book as well. You're going to get recommendations about other books which you can go and read to, again, educate yourself about black excellence and black history. There is also affirmations in there to help boost things like self-esteem. I know for a lot of people it's hard to actually admit publicly that, you know, our self-esteem levels are low, and that's okay. We live in a society which is actually training us and conditioning us to internalize and believe that we're so individual that we can't be helped by anybody else. And I'd like to let you know, if you're one of those people right now, that that's not the case. Reach out to your brother and sisters. Like, that's what we're here for. And if that person shuns you and turns you away, then they ain't really your brother, alright? Or a sister. But again, that's not just it. You're also going to get, which is going to be particularly helpful if you're a parent, is there is literally over 100 hours worth of lesson plans and activities that you can engage and utilize with your family so that you're all able to grow together. What else is in there as well? I'll tell you what. I'll actually put this into the presentation. So another thing that you're gonna get is you're gonna get access to a free downloadable graphic pack, and we'll just go through a couple of them right here right now. So these are actually taken out of the new book, 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro with Complete Proof. So this is fact 18. The medieval kingdom of Benin was built in a scale similar to the Great Wall of China and is recognized by the Guinness Book of World Records as the largest earthworks in the world carried out prior to the mechanical era. The defensive walls that enclose and protected the kingdoms are still partly visible in areas which were estimated to have stretched over 10,000 miles. That is nearly twice the length of the Great Wall of China. But that was built in Africa, but they don't tell us about this type of excellence. This, if anybody has ever been to any, or anybody who's been to any of my presentations this year, any of the live events, you will know that I always hail up these sisters here. So this is fact 78. The Ahosi warriors are known by their Europeanized moniker, the Dahomey Amazons, and they were an all-female Benin-based platoon used to fight against the French colonial invasion. Originally formed by a king, which I can't actually pronounce, so I don't want to disrespect the ancestor, as an elephant hunting and herding group, and it was not until the rule of King Agaja in 1708 CE that the group was actually militarized into the King's Guard. Now, at times, the Ahosi made up as much as 1/3 of the total army, and women joined freely, and records indicate that girls enrolled as young as 8 years old, and the last known surviving sister of the Ahosis was named Nawi, and she died in 1979, and she claimed that she fought against the French in 1892. Fact 59 for all of my Jamrock Jamaican born peoples them. This one will be close to home for you, okay? Fact 59 is Queen Nanny is regarded as a national hero throughout the Caribbean, and particularly in Jamaica for her role as a spiritual and military leader of the Maroons. Maroon means runaway and refers to the Africans that fled plantations to form a community that opposed slavery and British colonial rule. Nanny was of the Ashanti people and was enslaved during the 18th century before escaping with other enslaved Africans to the mountainous east areas of the island in Portland and St. Thomas. Now, Nanny was documented to be around the age of 60 at the peak of her tenure in control in of the Windward Maroons, and her cunning guerrilla military tactics were said to surprise and overwhelm the British soldiers who attempted to apprehend them. So anybody who knows a little bit about Nanny knows that she was serious. Okay, so she was giving out orders, she was outwitting them, using the terrain to her advantage. Like, she was serious. Oh, Shay, rest in peace, Queen Nanny. You did the thing. Fact 45. Mary Secord, again Jamaican-born businesswoman and healer, tops the greatest Black Britons list for her role in the Crimean War as a nurse and spirit raiser of the wounded soldiers, despite the continual struggles that she faced because of the colour of her skin. The War Office denied Secord's offer to assist, and she took it upon herself at her own expense to travel to the conflict zone, where she established a hotel as the base of her operations, and for the soldiers that she came into contact with and she helped, she became known as Mother Secord. You see, one thing I always say to people in regards to, well, how did Black people get into this situation and scenario that we're in today? A, it's very, very complicated, but B, we have very, very big hearts. Fact 83, and the last one that we're going to go into because you have to support the book, is fact 83. The Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations, formerly known as ASCAC, was founded in 1984 by Drs. John Henrik Clark, Asa G. Hilliard, Leonard Jeffries, Jacob Carruthers, Raketi Arman, Joseph Ben-Yochanan, and Malana Karanga. ASCAC focuses on the dissemination of ASCAC focuses on the dissemination of ASCAC focuses on disseminating a continuously evolving body of knowledge that rescues, reconstructs, and restores African history and culture for the improvement of the global worldview of ancient and modern Africa. Raw, that is a tongue twister. So ashe to all of the ancestors there. Oh. So, as per usual, what we're going to do is we will go through the fact. I will give you a moment to obviously pause, take your screenshots so you can back up and get any, take the references if you need them. So, fact 76. Since 1460 CE or earlier, the Negroes of Seville, Spain, had been wearing in the religious procession of the Feast of Corpus Christi a white robe, a hood, strikingly like that used by the KKK, which originated 428 years later. Just like to point out that there's nothing new under the sun. Okay, they haven't got the ability to be original. Let's make that extremely clear. Fact 77. The blacks, like the whites, have been struggling for thousands of years to change their hair from its natural form. Negroes arranged their hair with hot irons in Egypt more than 5,000 years ago. Fact 78. After his famous speech at the Atlanta Exposition in 1895 CE, Booker T. Washington refused an offer of $50,000 for a series of lectures because it would interrupt his work at Tuskegee, which was bringing him much less. Fact 79. The chief back to African leaders were Paul Coffey, Major Martin R. Delaney, an African explorer, Pat Singleton, William Ellis, Chief Sam, Dr. Thorne, and Marcus Garvey. The last named had a following much bigger than the rest combined. Ashe, rest in peace, the Honourable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Fact 80. The first two Americans to be decorated by France in the First World War were Henry Johnson and Needham Roberts, both Negroes. Johnson killed 4 Germans and wounded 28 others single-handed. Fact 81. The number of free Negroes in the United States who fought to perpetuate slavery is not exactly known, but there must have been thousands. In June 1861 CE, Tennessee began to recruit Negroes between the ages of 18 and 50, and South Carolina did the same in 1862 CE. In a review of 28,000 Confederate troops held at New Orleans on November the 23rd, 1861 CE, 7 months after the outbreak of war, there was one regiment of 1,400 free Negroes. Preston Rogers was a Negro and an unofficial quartermaster of General Forrest. He was given the Cross of Honor, the highest Confederate medal, and until his death in 1910 CE was treated in all other respects like a white man in the South. Fact 84. General A. Dodds, a Senegalese, was France's most known soldier prior to the First World War. In 1901, as the senior general, he commanded for a brief time an allied army of white Americans, Germans, British, French, and Japanese against the Boxers in China. Fact 85. Muhammad Ahmed, called the Mahdi, an ex-waiter of the Sudan, defeated every army that England sent against him, one of which was 11,000 men strong. At his death in 1885 CE, he had carved out himself an empire in Africa 1,600 miles long and 700 miles wide. Amongst those killed by the Mahdi was the famous English general Chinese Gordon. Fact 86. Jean-Francois, leader of the Haitian blacks in 1791 CE, an ex-slave and superior officer to Toussaint Louverture, rose to be a graduate of Spain. This gave him the great privilege of calling the King of Spain his cousin and wearing his hat in the royal presence. He was the favorite, or a favorite should I say, in the courthouse of Madrid. Resonate in peace, Jean-Francois, and of course Toussaint Louverture, you done know. Fact 87. Toussaint Louverture and his great mulatto rival General Rigaud were both thrown in the same dungeon in France by Napoleon in 1802. Later, at St. Helena, Napoleon declared the imprisonment of Toussaint a grave political error, because of course he lost control of Haiti. Fact 88. The Rock of Gibraltar, the symbol of stability, is named after a Negro ex-slave. It is a corruption of Gebel Tariq, or the Mountain of Tariq. Tariq, who is a Moor, captured the rock, which was then called Calip or Calpe in 711. Later he conquered southern Spain. Tariq's countrymen ruled Spain thereafter for 700 years. Which of course is the famous, entry of the Moors into Spain. Fact 89. The fastest bicyclist in the world, or the world has ever known, was Marshal Major W. Taylor. He defeated the champions of Europe and America. His greatest feat was winning the 1 mile motor-paced race in 1 minute and 19 seconds, and he died in 1932 at the tender age of 54. Rest in peace. Fact 90. The Brazilian Emancipation Proclamation of 1888 freed all slaves on the day of promulgation. The British Emancipation of 1834 CE did not take place until 4 years later, while the American Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 issued free those slaves who Abraham Lincoln had no power to free, and permitted the continued enslavement of those who he had no power to free. Okay, so albeit Abraham Lincoln said, yeah, okay, boom, go ahead, be free, the reality of the situation is he had no power to actually enforce a lot of what he was asking. And also a good point to point out as well, in Britain, regardless of the fact that the Emancipation Proclamation took place in 1834, as you can see at the bottom there, the proof actually stipulates and states that black people were continued in servitude and held as apprentices and were not actually free until 1883, just so you know. Fact 91. Prince Abd el-Rahman, a highly decorated grandson of the Emperor of Timbuktu, was captured in battle and sold into slavery in America. Years later, whilst a doctor who had been travelling in his land previously saw him at Natchez, Mississippi, Rahman was freed in 1829 and £4,000 was paid for the liberation of his children. Imagine that. Fact 92. In 1670, Virginia passed a law forbidding Negroes from buying white people. This was 51 years after the Negro arrived in chains. The same law was repeated in 1748 CE. Negroes brought white people at such numbers in Louisiana that the state made a similar law in 1818. Fact 93. The slaves first held in the United States were not black people, but white. They were Europeans, mostly British, who died like fleas on the slave ships across. On one voyage, 1,100 perished out of 1,500. At another time, 350 out of 400. And in Virginia, white servitude for a limited period was sometimes extended to life. White people were sold in the United States up until 1832 CE, 50 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Andrew Johnson, the President of the United States, who was a runaway himself and was also advertised in the newspaper as so. So, I mean, one of the big misconceptions is that black people, have always been slaves and always been, under the foot. But the reality of the situation is, not being romantic or removing the Pan-Africanism, so to speak, from it, or the hotepery, as people will come with, is like, the cycle of slavery is, the shoe's been on both. Fact 94. Ketiweho, king of Zululand, South Africa, massacred an entire British army sent against him in 1879 CE, and a few days later defeated and killed the Prince Napoleon, heir to the French throne. Ketiweho taught the Europeans the skirmish line in warfare. These Zulu man them were not playing no games. Fact 95. Pedro I, coloured son of John VI, became the first emperor of Brazil in 1822 CE. Pedro married the sister of Napoleon's second wife, Gloria, and Pedro's daughter became the Queen of Portugal and was sister-in-law of Victoria, the Queen of England. Many members of the European royalty trace their ancestry to the Negro ruler John VI. Just saying. Fact 96. Mouli Ismail, Emperor of El Morocco, or Morocco, whose mother was a Negro slave, had 25,000 white slaves captured on the seas or on the seas of Europe and the British Isle to build his palace at Meknes. Mouli Ismail's stables were the vastest in existence, with stalls of over 12,000 horses. Mouli Ismail's ships raided the coast of Europe for slaves until his death in 1727 CE. 97. In 1538 CE, Askia, the great emperor of Songhay, ruled the empire that stretched from the Atlantic Ocean to the Lake Chad, and it was much larger than Western Europe, and his capital was called Timbuktu. Fact 98. On November the 15th, 213 BCE, Hannibal, a full-blooded Negro marching through the conquered territory in Spain and France, performed an astounding feat of crossing the Alps with only 26,000 of his original 82,000 men remaining. He defeated Rome, the mightiest military power of the age, who had 1 million men in every battle for the next 15 years. Pardon me. Hannibal is the father of military strategy. His tactics are still taught today in leading military academies all over the United States, England, France, Germany, and other countries. Hannibal is unusually depicted as a white man, but we can actually see on the coins which we can find at the British Museum, which you can see on the bottom there, that he was definitely a black African brother. Fact 99. There were 3 black African popes of Rome. Victor in 189 CE to 199 CE. Is it Melchiades of 311 CE to 312 CE, and that was the Pope who led Christianity to the final triumph against the Roman Empire. And there was also Saint Gelasius of 496 CE. And for the proof of them things there, you can obviously take your screenshot. You can look at the Liber Pontificalis. Fact 100. Dr. Daniel Williams, Chicago surgeon who died in 1931, was the first person to perform a successful operation on the human heart. So of course we know from the innovations and the pioneering work that he did that we've been able to save millions and millions and millions of people's lives from that. So that is the 100 amazing facts about the Negro by J.A. Rogers. Okay, remember, as you watch back some of, or think back to some of the things that you've heard, remember J.A. Rogers only had access to the information which he had access to at that period of time. We are now obviously in a position, you know, with a bit more of an advantage with the likes of the internet, so we can do our due diligence, we can do our updates, we can do our research. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Okay, in the next week I am going to be releasing a short presentation covering maybe 10 to 15 facts which are out of the new book, cover a little bit about the lesson plan, how to use that, and you know, we're going to run some competitions, because if you don't remember, 50% of the profits going forward on the book are going to be donated to the We Will Rise Together project. So as we grow, the rest of the diaspora is able to grow as well. So peace and more powers. Uncle Justin Neb, She'em Hotep, peace and more powers. Thank you for your time, attention and focus. Please go onto the Patreon if you are not a Patreon supporter, and you know, like the video, share the video, subscribe to the thing, support, because as a group, as a unit, we're able to do great things together. So thank you for your time.